Well, hello and welcome to the Fairhaven Church Parent Talks podcast, where we desire to equip and empower you as parents to lead well in your home. Today, I am joined by Justin and Nicole, and we're going to have a great conversation as we are moving into a new book of the Bible. And so that's really exciting. Before we get started, though, this question that I have for you, it goes along with what we're learning. And I gave you a heads up this time. Mm-hmm. You are welcome. So my question, though, is, I want to phrase it exactly correctly. Who is the wisest person you know, like in your life?
I'm going to go with new because it's my grandma. She walked with the Lord really closely, my mom's mom, and she had every reason to not do that in her life. She knows what it's like to be abandoned and have to raise her kids on her own and lived a life that was complicated, you know? And yet growing up, knowing her, it was never complicated. She just walked with the Lord. She walked wisely. My mom said one of the things that she always used to say when there was like a controversial thing happening in the family, she'd say, I don't have to have an opinion about that.
Oh, that's
and just
good.
Let it go.
That's good.
All the time, I'm like, I don't have to have an opinion about that. She just knew where she could speak wisdom and life and love into the family.
Yeah.
And even though family is chaotic for everyone, just in case you think other people have perfect families, we don't. Nobody does. And that example of wisdom and faithfulness to God, even having very little and even having been treated unfairly, just she lived wisely.
That's great. I like that phrase. I don't have to have an opinion about that.
Yeah.
I am taking
How do you do that? You
Yeah.
know?
I like it.
It's good.
Yeah.
You don't hear that really
No.
at all.
Ever.
Yeah. Everyone's
amazing.
opinions are like the loudest things that we have.
Yeah.
And doesn't serve people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so good.
I liked this question, and I realized I was grateful that a couple different people came to mind. You know, I was like,
yeah.
oh, it's nice to feel like I have wise people in my life.
Yeah, for sure.
But I think what specifically came to my mind, it is technically two people, but I thought of my parents. But specifically this past year, they've been walking through a cancer diagnosis from my mom, and they have just shown so much wisdom in how they've navigated this year.
Yeah.
And specifically, their willingness to pause when everything feels like it's moving so fast and not make decisions too quickly and be willing to just kind of wait and hear God's voice first. And so it's been a very notable part of the past year. So they definitely came to my mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would agree. They're
Yeah.
awesome. They're awesome. Such a great testimony of faithfulness. It's
Who's the
so
wisest
good.
person you know?
So I always want to say my husband, and I feel like
a wise guy.
he is a
I like
wise
him.
guy, right?
Yeah, totally.
But
a real wise guy.
a real wise
Real
guy.
wise guy.
It's my dad for me, for sure. He was always the wisest person, always the person I would go to for any like question or struggle. Because I'm a very private person. Like I don't really go to a lot of people for a lot of things, but I would always like go to him. So definitely he was
He
the
always
wisest.
knew what to say.
He always knew what to say. It was calm. I'm not always a calm person. I get a little worked up. I'm a little type A, like things to happen my way, control freak kind of situation.
Somehow he's like even.
It'd be like, yes.
Yeah.
Which
There's
is
something-
how my husband is. So it works out.
Interesting. I feel like there's something connected of like the wise in my mind was because they're willing to wait, and your grandma was willing to say, I don't need to have an opinion.
Yeah.
And yours was calm. So there's
Yeah.
something about the like slow moving
Yes.
trust, I feel like.
Yeah.
People who are wise aren't tossed back and forth.
That's so true.
Yeah.
Yeah. So good. Well, that was a great question. Great answers. I love that. Okay, like I said, today we're beginning in a new part of the Bible. So we're going to be heading into 1 Kings. And so as we move, though, from 2 Samuel to 1 Kings, it's really important. There's so much that happens throughout Scripture. And it's important to understand the history, the culture, like all the things that are going on, because it helps us to really understand what these people are walking through, like decisions that are being made, a lot of these different things. So Justin, as a history guy, as a guy who enjoys these kinds of things,
I do. It's so interesting.
give us some historical context and then move us into what's happening in 1 Kings 1 and 2.
Yeah. So the main thing that's happening here, going from Samuel to Kings, is we're going from the king that was after God's own heart, David, to everything that's going to come after. So at the beginning of First Kings, David is old. David is at the very end of his days, and there's a tension of what's going to happen next. Is this kingdom going to last? We read it like, of course, there's a bazillion kings, and some people know their names, but it was an open question at the time whenever there was a transition in a kingdom. We saw with Absalom earlier in 1 Samuel that it was an open question during David's life, who's going to be the next king? And so another son of David's tries to take over while he's old and crown himself king, even though it wasn't Solomon who David had said was going to be king. Next, Adonijah sets himself up to be king. So there's all this tension around who is the next king going to be, and it settles on Solomon. To make a very long story short and skip over a bunch of stuff you should read in 1 Kings chapter 1, it's going to be a transition of power from David to Solomon. Solomon, the son of Bathsheba. There's all kinds of a story to tell there, but Solomon is the one who's going to be the king. And David gives Solomon all these instructions for the beginning of his reign, and we see that this transfer of power does happen. David does die. Solomon becomes king. Solomon inherits his father's legacy, which we're going to talk a lot about today. There's really a lot that happens. You should read it going into this for the context. But the main thing that's happening is we're transitioning from David to Solomon.
Yeah, good. So we're going to be focusing on two very specific things. How our faithfulness to God leaves a legacy, and then the importance of pursuing wisdom. So Nicole, let's start with that first point, which as we transition, we want to talk about how do we see David's faithfulness to God leave a legacy for Solomon? And how was Solomon then impacted by David's faithfulness to God? Understanding that there is some complication in this story, right? Like you mentioned, Solomon is the son of Bathsheba. We talked about that last week. I mean, there's a lot involved there, but we also still see faithfulness throughout that story. And so help us understand that.
Yeah, I mean, we see that it's very clear that Solomon was introduced and was made to know who God was as he was being brought up. So clearly David was faithful in that and how he brought up Solomon. And we see that that's true because, not to ruin what's coming in a couple of minutes, but we see Solomon talk about how he's witnessed his dad's faithfulness to God and God's faithfulness to David. And so it's very notable to Solomon that God has walked with David as he's been king and ruled well. But we also see that David was faithful in his time as king, as when he learned that he wouldn't be the one to build the temple, but that it would come from his lineage. He was faithful to God and trusted that that was true. And so David also set up Solomon well by expanding the territory and building the treasury and supplies needed for the temple. So David's faithfulness also very tangibly set up Solomon's time as king.
Yeah. I love that. I love the picture of seeing how the faithfulness can come through or be shown through multiple different ways. So then when we read in chapter 3, this is where we get into the wisdom part, actually, that the Lord appeared to Solomon in a dream. So, Justin, what resulted from that interaction?
Yeah, so this is interesting because as Nicole just said, the temple's not there yet. The walls are being built. Solomon's house is being built. The walls of Jerusalem are being built. So he goes up to worship at the tabernacle, and he is in a dream and has an encounter with God where God says that he will give him whatever he asks for. And Solomon, probably the best decision of his life in this dream and this interaction with God, asked for an understanding heart. That's what we mean when we talk about wisdom. An understanding heart to divide between what's right and what's wrong. And in really one way to think of that is moral judgment of what's right and what's wrong. He didn't ask make me the smartest, make me the best ruler, but it's this judgment of make me able to understand, give my heart the depth of understanding. And we see it come into play really fast in his life. But that is the moment that he receives that gift from God of that understanding heart.
Yeah, and what a interesting thing, right, for him to ask. Of all the things, I mean, there were no caveats to what it was that he could ask.
Yes.
And yet that is what he chose to ask God to give him, his
Yeah.
wisdom, which is kind of mind-blowing. If
It
I'm thinking
is.
about it, I don't know if that would be the thing
I know that
would.
would be my first go-to.
Yeah.
you
It's
know?
like you'd like to think, you know, but would it be? I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, wisdom is so important. And we're going to talk a little bit about specifically worldly wisdom and biblical, godly wisdom. And so, one of the points that we're talking about, really particularly with students, is the importance of pursuing wisdom. So, what is that difference between worldly and godly wisdom? What would you guys say? How would you help parents as they're having conversations with their students or kids about wisdom?
Mhm.
Like, what is that difference? How do they help them to figure that out and define that, separate it?
Yeah, I think it's many things. So if it feels overwhelming as you approach this in your family and your own conversations, of course it is, because in the world we live in, the pace that things are coming at your student, the pace that things are coming to you as a parent, it is overwhelming, and we need that wisdom more than ever. That godly wisdom is primarily, I would say, rooted in obedience to God in his ways. So this wisdom that we want our students to have, it's the wisdom to see the world with God's eyes, to see your problems with God's eyes, to see your own sin with God's eyes. I think awareness of sin is a huge element of wisdom. So it's not wisdom of like, what's the best decision, what's the smartest thing. It's sort of rooted in that. I was reading that the Hebrew word for understanding mind or understanding heart in some of the translations that Solomon asked for, like it is rooted in that moral judgment of like, and we get moral judgment from God on what is right and what is wrong. And so I would say obedience is a huge part of that, not overstepping our bounds. All of our stories earlier about who was wise in our lives were people who were steady. They weren't tossed back and forth, but they knew what their role in the story was.
Yeah.
So I would just start with saying that wisdom isn't about what gets me the best outcome, but it's about what's the most obedient thing to the Lord and what he's taught me.
Yeah, I think the two things that came to my mind, which I think kind of fall in line with what you were saying, was is what I'm seeking something that aligns with Scripture? I think that's a huge basis for like understanding if that's godly wisdom. Because obviously, if it doesn't, then it wouldn't be from the Lord. But then also, is this something that will bring God glory? And knowing that like our lives were built to be able to bring God glory. So having that be something you're rooted in, I think would be the difference there between godly and worldly wisdom. But
The root difference, and I think there's like a sanctification element to it. Like we're being made more holy. I talked about awareness of sin, and it's like it's more than like this is right or wrong right now, but this is like I want to be closer to Jesus than I was before. I want to be more dead to sin that through this decision, through this thing that we're facing, and more alive to Christ in where's this going to lead me? Which path brings me closer to Jesus?
yeah.
I think is an important part of
That's
that.
good.
And I think another thing, it kind of goes back when you asked the question, like, who's the most like wise person I know? And I was just feeling grateful to feel like I know wise people. I was reflecting on just the value of having people in your life that are farther in their walk with God than you are. And I think so much of that comes from they've just experienced God's character in different ways and in tangible ways. And then you carry that with you and it changes the way you respond to situations in the future. And so I think just like witnessing that in other people's lives really brings just a lot of clarity to you as you're really pursuing your relationship with God and learning more about his character on your own.
Yeah, that's good. So we talked earlier about having a legacy of faith. So how do we see a legacy of faith and a desire to pursue wisdom? Like how do they intertwine?
Yeah, I think you can see a lot of that in David, and it's important to notice. I mean, even go read 1 Kings 1 or any of the Bible about David's life. Like he wasn't perfect. We've mentioned that the whole time we've talked about David. But his legacy of faith was that he always, when he realized he messed up, he took that opportunity to take that next step towards the Lord. He continually woke up to his sin. He continually woke up to his distance from God and sought to close the gap. So his wisdom gives us a legacy on how to live, because it's not like he pretended he was perfect. He wasn't some unattainably perfect person that we could never live up to. He was somebody like us who messed up. So when I think about leaving a legacy of faith for my children, it's way too late for me to try to leave a legacy where I don't mess up. I do it all the time. I'm a regular dad and I get mad and then I go and apologize to my children. Like, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry that I treated you that way or whatever. Like I'm trying to model for them that when we mess up, we can make it right. And that matters in our relationships with God. And so that legacy of faith is what I hope we can leave them, to keep pursuing.
Yeah.
Keep going back to him. His arms are always open for you.
Yeah. I think we oftentimes, like when we think about a legacy of faith, it feels like a big, like, what's the one thing, right? But it's really like a life of constant faithfulness. Like that's how you're leaving that legacy. I was in the car with my daughter actually yesterday, and she has recently had some significant health issues come up that were completely shocking. And I had found out about her health problem through a phone call. So for the past couple of days, every time I get a phone call from someone, I'm like anxious, like what just happened? And we were in the car driving and my husband called, and instantly I thought someone's in a car accident, like something happened. And I just told her, I said, mom's like just feeling a little anxious right now, because she could see it on me. She's like, well, that was weird. Like what's going on? I mean, she's 15. So, and I said, I'm just kind of anxious about what's happening right now. And she said, Mom, just trust God.
It's amazing.
She said,
Mom, relax.
Yeah. She said, nothing happens outside of his control. Anything that happens is because there's a purpose. Like he has a purpose for it. And I was like, okay. And those are words that we speak. Like when she was in the hospital, like those were the words I was speaking. And so it was just a reminder as we're teaching this lesson that a legacy of faith is sometimes just those small moments of planting those seeds. So it was a good reminder for me.
I know. I feel like I don't necessarily think of the people in my life who know the most, like about the Bible. I mean, obviously that's significant, but it is the people where I've witnessed them in a moment have faith, and kind of that like life spent with people kind of relationship where it's like, oh, they're the faith I think of.
So good. Well, I think it's a really important question for us to ponder is, what do we need to do as a family or as people, as parents, to leave a legacy of faith? So have a conversation about that with your family this week. Talk about what does that look like? What can we do differently? What maybe needs to change in our lives in order for that to become a priority? Maybe it hasn't actually been a priority, and that's something that you can switch or you can navigate this week. So I would encourage you and challenge you to do that this week as you spend time with your kids and with your students. We hope that this was encouraging to you. We hope that you and us ask God for wisdom as we seek him and pursue him. So we'll see you next week.